So we've gone through, let's kind of recap today real fast. We went from requests into controllers, and now we're starting to get to the end of that process where we start looking at design and layout. Layout XML is used, the point is you can set in your action you can specify to use the layout XML, and from that render a view. And as an aside, we get very hands-on with this tomorrow. Block classes are connected with templates via the layout XML. Most often. All right, so the layout. I don't know that this is the best representation. It's kind of this flow chart, but really, I prefer to think of it in terms of containers. So, all right, so Magento layout. Okay, really, what is it? Think of a DOM structure. All right, think of HTML. Think of nested stuff. So, body. Well, I will say. Let me not say body here. Let me just say, that we'll have some sort of page element, and in it we might have a head block, and we'll have a header. You don't actually see this, of course, but then we'll have the header that we do see, and then in here we might have some sort of general content area, which might be composed of several columns. That's really what we're trying to get at here. But in here, in these different areas, these are all blocks. This is a block. It happens to be inside this block. Same with this. And in here, we might have other little blocks. Okay? So that's Magento's approach to this. It's all just blocks. Blocks may contain other blocks. Some blocks contain lists of blocks, and that's it. Okay? That's Magento. Generally, that's set up in the layout XML. All right, so our layout, we saw this in the previous lesson, where in our configuration, with which we are so intimately acquainted at this point, our configuration, we have a front-end node for front-end design updates, front-end layout updates, so this would just have to be the path that you remember. Inside of front-end layout updates, we simply have a unique node, and then inside that a file node, and then this is just a path and a file. Okay? If I had foo/catalog.xml, then in layout folders, I would expect to see a foo folder which would contain catalog.xml. Okay? All right. So, layout XML schema. The layout XML files, so all of these are merged, just like the configuration, with one difference. Like we were discussing the other day, there's that fallback thing. So if one layout file, for example, in our custom theme, if we have catalog XML in layout, that is the catalog XML that's used. No other catalog XML will be used. For that reason, that's why we use the local XML. We want to just try and leave those in place, or we have to just remember to merge changes as we upgrade. There are actually other reasons. There are other reasons why using local XML will force you to use certain practices, which really are best practices. In terms of, if you think about, if you go into catalog XML and you start changing names of blocks, and then you change the names in the templates so you can still get the content, other modules may want to use that, may want to access that block by that name. So you may have broken functionality. Magento actually does that, unfortunately. So, anyway, the big takeaway is all the layout, once particular files are found, well, that's all smashed down into one big just DOM structure. Okay? So just big sets of rules. and we'll go into the particulars about what's combined where. Generally, things in here aren't going to override each other. Okay? In fact, they're not going to override each other. All they're going to do is add instructions. Just aggregate instructions more and more and more. And we'll look at that in a second. Because the layout XML can be absolutely mystifying if you look at it and you just see all these crazy, what are all these different nodes in here, and then inside there, what are these nodes and what are the rules? Well, we have an entire day tomorrow devoted in part to that. So, the layout fallback, as we recall, I started to mention this. If we specify, a package and a theme for layouts, well, that's the first place that the system is going to look to try and find that. Is going to try and find that file. If it doesn't find it there, then it'll look in our package. Either if we've configured a default, that'll be the next stop. If we haven't configured a default, it'll be package default, and then ultimately we'll fall back to base default. Okay. Again, I'm not going to belabor this right now because we go into this later in depth. All right. So, quick lesson. Print out some pages merged XML, print a file using Magelog. So a couple of little tricks that we're doing here. One, I just want to show you some of this XML that we have going on and how we can get at it inside of our module. And also introduce you fine folks, because you've earned it. I will introduce you to Magelog. So, to start, I don't need that. I don't need that. I really just need my controller and a configuration file. Don't even need my configuration file, actually. I'll leave it open for now. So, I just want, hey, it's great. I've got my controller set up, configured, so I can just keep adding actions as much as I want. So here we're going to do public function layout action. All right. So obviously, in our browser, then we'd go to our site base URL and whatever you configured for your front name, followed by layout. So how do we get the layout? Well, if you remember, the layout is a bunch of XML, and we need to, let's call it in the scope here. So we'll call this load layout. And I'm just going to tell you a bunch of functions and stuff right now, and we'll be kind of going into more specifics on them for the rest of today and pretty much most of tomorrow. So, this load layout, now we want to get the layout that we've initialized and caused to be parsed according to a certain set of rules, which I will explain at some point. And then, let's see, get update, and as string. Okay, you won't be doing this in your modules ever, unless you're just curious. Okay, this is just an example exercise. I'm going to assign this, actually I'm going to assign this to a variable. So this XML equals this, okay? Now, if I want to appropriately use response objects to get content to the browser, let's see, this get response will get me the response object that was created. And I can, oh boy, what is it? Set. You Zen guys can tell me, I think. Yeah, set header. And I think it is content type. And I believe text XML. What's that? Well, I want text. So, I don't know, we'll figure it out here in a second. And then I will also need to call setBody and just pass in. So all I have here, my XML variable, is just a string. So I can just pass this into the setBody call. And again, folks, just bear with me for these examples because this is really just a demonstrative thing we're doing here. It may just be text. I don't know. We'll find out here. Actually, it should be capital C. I don't know. All right. So I should now be able to go into my browser, hit my layout action. And then I think to be correct, this should be capital C and capital T. Hey, look at me learning right along with you guys. And I'm simply doing that just so I get a pretty output. There we go. Yay. And there was much rejoicing. So, wow. Hey, what do we have? Woo, whippy. How did we get this? Look at all this stuff. Where did this come from? Well, when we called load layout, we did something. We took a bunch of XML, all the layout XML in the system, and because we didn't call load layout with any particular parameter, what we ended up with was the default node. So in every layout XML file in your application, anywhere that you see default inside that layout node, all these instructions are passed in there. Okay? So what does that mean? Well, quite simply, means that if we do, let's see, so we had layout action here. So if I wanted to, let's do, I'll do public function default action. Okay. And now I can just simply say this load layout. And then I can say render layout. Oh, that's going to give me the same thing. So if I go to default, and I'll back up to that in just a second. Just want to show you the effect. Hey, I get a page. All of these things, this is all default stuff. So these were all specified in default, what are called layout update handles inside your layout files. All right? So back to the code here. That's just what that looks like. This load layout, render layout. But here, what I'm doing, load layout, I'm actually getting that layout object and pulling out the update, all those updates from the files, and even possibly from configuration. If I were on a CMS page, I can specify layout update, or product page, or category page. You can specify layout updates, and just getting it as a string, so nice and formatted when I use text plain, and just send it back that way. So that's what happened here. But this would be a much more typical usage, obviously, for your controllers. You don't actually have to do much work at all to get. And then really what you would do for your custom module, if you had some custom stuff to put in there, well, you would just have your layout file. And in there you would have this XML configuration that would be putting blocks in certain places. That's the gist of layout XML and its connection with controllers. So again, controllers only tie into layout XML if they use the layout, the Mage core model layout object. That's good stuff. Now, controllers. So in your controller, you're not going to use your controller. Your action will not utilize any layout XML unless you tell it to. In this case, we're saying this load layout, render layout. Render layout actually will will instantiate all these blocks. We'll get all their output. We'll take all that output as a string, tack it on to the response object. And we did a similar thing here. We got the response object, and we did this, basically set the body there, and it gets flushed to the browser. So pretty low level of what's going on here. You don't have to totally get that yet, and I don't expect you to, because we have to do some more examples to really internalize it. Okay. Now we need to log this. We need to log this output here. So I will. Let's see. Let me do a little housekeeping here. Okay. So. Okay. In my layout action, I'm going to reuse this layout action so we don't have to type a whole bunch more stuff. So in addition to doing this, I could also call Mage log. So Mage log basically extends from Zen log, if I remember correctly. And Mage log takes a few parameters. Message level, file, and force log. Okay? And you can find this definition in appmage.php. So, in this method, we actually check a configuration setting. This configuration setting here is, I have to log in again, under developer. Oh, cool. And log settings. So here I can enable logs. So if logs are enabled, then I don't have to do much. If logs are not enabled and I wanted to log this output all the time, then I would need to pass in some parameters here. In fact, I'd need to get to that fourth parameter and specify true. So in this case, all I need to do is pass in my message, which is just going to be that XML string. Now I need to specify a level. Well, these levels come from Zend log. And then there are just some class constants here. So in this case, I just have an info. I think the default is debug. I'll look at that in a second. Let's see. Yeah, debug. So here I'm just collecting some info, so I'm just choosing to specify info. And then I can even specify a custom file. So normally if you have if you're calling magelog, it'll go to system.log or whatever you have configured in the admin. Here maybe I want to do layout.log. Okay? And then I'm just going to say true. So I want this to log all the time. Now, where does this show up? Under var log. Okay? So right now I have nothing there. So, what's the expected behavior if I hit my layout action again? All right. I should now have, hey, look at that. I have this log file. That's pretty cool. It's got a timestamp. Tells me the log level. And then the nice thing is you can also pass in models, basically objects and stuff, and the log method will actually call the necessary, basically call printr for you. So that's magelog. It can be very, very handy while you're developing modules, especially, and then if you need to just capture information on a live system. One of the things to be wary of is what you're logging. I mean, if you're logging by accident, if you're logging a full loaded model, that data, it can be quite extensive, and you can very quickly fill up a hard drive and exhaust your client's patience. My site's down. What's wrong? I was debugging, and I forgot. And it's 2 months later, and your hard drive's full. And this, why is there this 15 gigabyte text file in my install? Well, that's why. So, I certainly recommend that you be wary about your log calls. So, any questions on that?
Can you just go back to
Yeah, absolutely. I know I kind of went past. Yeah, I went pretty quickly here. So, again, the minimum I would need would be just that first parameter. But in order to get my output, and then in this case, by default configuration, if I just have that first parameter in there, I would have a debug level of a log level of debug, and it would be by default system log. System.log is a file to which information is logged, and I would have to have logging enabled in order for it to log. Yeah, but I mean, I use Magento all the time. And I'll just go ahead and say something else you could do. I mean, we could instantiate, instead of doing this here, comment this out, we could instantiate a model. We can, model equals mage get model, and let's see, what did we have here? Oh, I've got all this. There we go. All right, and then I could mage log, and see, I can just pass this in here. And I'll go ahead and copy this information again. I'll say, let's say, model.log. Okay. So then if I were to hit my layout action again, well, I would expect to see this model.log file. Oh, okay, look at that. I've got some information here. Cool. Yeah, so you just pass in objects. Yeah. I mean, this is probably more typical. And in fact, a safer thing to do, because generally, if you're going to log anything at all, you're just going to want to see what kind of data the model has. So with any object that extends from variant object, I swear I will get to it at some point, there's this handy method called debug. Because, as I said, those can get quite large. And this will actually give me the ability to just get at the data inside of there and chop out some of the recursion that can happen. Okay, so if I hit my layout action again, my model, yep, and you see here I just have this empty array, and that's really just grabbing this data. So, my more typical usage.